Good evening. I'd like to welcome members to the council meeting. Father Anthony Cho has sent his apologies for this evening. Can I ask members when speaking to speak directly into the microphone? This will enable members and members of the public to hear. Can I remind members and members of the public to place their mobile phones to silent and to stand, where possible, when speaking? Can I also remind those members who wish to speak this evening to keep their hands up until acknowledged by the Chief Executive? I'd like to remind members the meeting is being live streamed and we welcome the members of the public in the gallery watching and listening to the council meeting tonight. I'd also like to remind members of the council's adopted code of conduct for councillors, which you agreed to and are expected to adhere to. Please note the apologies received on page 1 of the order paper. Are there any further apologies? Councillor Spate.
Councillor Roy Jones, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Item 2. I move that the minutes of the meeting of the 29th of January 2025 set out in the agenda on pages 9 to 26 be approved as a correct record. Is that seconded? Thank you. Is any member in disagreement with the accuracy of the minutes? These minutes are approved. Item 3, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest to be made? Thank you. Announcements on behalf of the Mayor and the Leader of the Council. I'd like us all to take a moment and remember Thurrock's fallen of World War II on page 7 of the agenda. February 1945, Godric Walter A., Thomas Gerald B., Jordan Richard G., Knight Joseph. I'll now invite the leader to make his announcements.
Madam Mayor, not so much announcement, but a welcome to Councillor Cockshall to his new role as, at the moment, interim leader of the Conservative group. I look forward to a constructive relationship with George as we continue the improvement journey of the Council. And as I understand, this may have been, were he here, Councillor Jeffrey's last meeting as a councillor. It would be only right to acknowledge the work and the time he put in, his commitment as leader of the council, and for the time he's given as an elected member.
Thank you. Item 5, public questions. Public questions can be found on page 27 of the agenda. And I'd like to ask those members of the public who have submitted questions to please read out their questions when asked to do so. Question 1 from Mr. Perrin to the leader. Good evening, Mr. Perrin. Please come forward and read out your question as set out on page 27 of the agenda.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No doubt, Councillor Kent, no doubt you are pleased with the decision to postpone the Thurrock local government elections in May 2025. However, there are some, like me, who are displeased and consider they are being denied the opportunity of electing councillors by means of the ballot box, admittedly temporarily. Do you have some sympathy for dissenters and recognise we are not hell-bent on wasting public money?
Leader, please respond.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, of course I have sympathy for that view. I have enormous sympathy for that view, and I would never suggest that those who were asking for elections were, as Mr Perrin puts it, hell-bent on wasting public money. I'm someone who's sat in this chamber, or the chamber next door, for very nearly 32 years. In that time, I've been elected or re-elected 12 times. I believe fundamentally in the principles of democracy, and that includes as its lifeblood fighting elections, standing for elections. And those of us in this chamber, of all parties and of no party, are in many ways slightly odd in that we enjoy in our spare time going out, knocking on strangers' doors, making the argument for why we would be the person that should be representing them at a local level and why our party would do a better job of running the council than the opposing party. What has changed is the size of this council's debt means that we are no longer financially viable. There is no future for this council. We need to move as quickly as we can to become part of something that is stronger, that is more resilient and is more able to deliver for people who live in Thurrock. Unfortunately, if we're going to do that in the timetable that the government has set down, we cannot afford the time to hold elections this year. With the pre-election period and the period afterwards, as we come back together, we wait for council AGM, we wait for groupings to be formed, would take 10 to 12 weeks out of that timetable. That would just make it impossible to do it on the government's timetable. The state of the council finances, the seriousness of this position means that, in my view, we just don't have the luxury of time. That's why, reluctantly, I, on a cross-party basis, we requested the postponement from government.
Mr Perrin, do you wish to pose a supplementary question?
Yes, please, Madam Mayor. Considering how the council itself has wasted vast sums of public money, resulting in a bankrupt council, I am sure the people of Thurrock will take no lectures from councillors about wasting public money. It is claimed that it would be a waste of public money to hold local government elections in May 2025, and then possibly a few weeks, months later, hold another election for the new system. As I understand the issue of devolution and elected mayors is still subject to consultation. There is no guarantee that the question of evolution in elected mayors will be resolved before the May 26 local government elections, and that a further postponement is likely. Again, people will be denied their right to vote to elect councillors of their choice until at least May 2027, probably longer. Local government elections should be held according to the existing system until the new system is deemed fit for purpose and in place. Methinks the postponing of Thurrock's May 2025 local government elections was more about party political interest than the waste of public money. Democracy is not a waste of public money, nor should it be subject to affordability. It is priceless, and millions of people have made the ultimate sacrifice and paid with their lives to ensure its survival. My question is, can you assure the people of Thurrock that the council will not seek future postponements of local government elections and will hold elections according to the existing system until such time as the new system is in place and fit for purpose?
Thank you, Mr Perrin. Leader, would you like to respond?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I think there's much in there that we would actually all agree on. I've said before, this is not about considering elections to be a waste of money. This is about moving as fast as we can to be part of a new authority that has the capacity and the economies of scale that we need to deliver public services that are as good as possible for the people who live in Ockenden or Bellis or Grays or Stanford or Corringham, in whatever the new configuration of councils may be. As far as devolution is concerned, the government has launched the consultation. The consultation's open. I urge everybody to take part in that. I am absolutely as certain as I can be that we will be electing a mayor for Greater Essex, the first mayor for Greater Essex, next May. I can't be certain, but at the same time we will have elections to the shadow new unitary authority. I hope we do, but of course I can't guarantee that.
Thank you. Mr Perrin, you can now take your seat back in the public gallery. Item 6, petitions from members of the public and councillors. Please be advised that in accordance with the council's petition scheme, no notice of petition has been received. Item 7, update report in respect of those petitions presented at council and council offices. This report can be found on page 29 of the agenda and is information on the status of the petitions received. Item 8, appointments to committees and outside bodies, statutory and other panels. I have not been informed of any changes to appointments. Item 9, annual pay policy statement. Councillor Muldowney, would you please introduce the report that can be found on pages 31 to 48? You have 5 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm pleased to introduce the annual pay policy statement for 2025-26. There aren't any significant changes to this statement. It was approved by Council back in 2024-25. But just to sort of remind members where we came from, because there were quite substantial changes that we made last year through some good cross-party working and some cross-party agreement. So obviously it's no secret that Thurrock Council has faced significant financial and governance challenges in recent years. The government's intervention highlighted serious weaknesses in how we manage finances, senior officer pay and performance. As part of the government directions, we were required to introduce stronger oversight, clearer policies and better accountability in these areas. So going back to 2023, one of the biggest controversies was around senior officer pay awards at a time when obviously we were facing severe financial turmoil. Understandably, there was public anger that high salaries and pay increases for senior officers continued while the council was struggling. And this is why we did work well, I think, cross-party to take decisive action to fix the system. And I just want to acknowledge everybody's part in that. At that time, we adopted the Local Government Association's Chief Officer Job Evaluation Scheme, which provides a fair, structured and transparent way to determine senior pay. We also aligned pay awards with the Joint National Committee for Chief Officers, bringing us in line with most other local authorities and ensuring pay rises were no longer arbitrary. The impact has been a fairer, more accountable and efficient system. So instead of having to bring lots of pay reports forward, we have a policy and we act in accordance with that policy. And that's simply applied. But reforming senior pay was just the first step. Improving performance management across the entire workforce is just as important. So this work has been taken forward under our administration in 3 stages. First, the corporate plan, led by Councillor Kent, the leader of the council, set out our strategic vision and priorities for the borough. Second, the performance management and assessment framework, led by Councillor Worrell, created a stronger system for tracking and evaluating performance at all levels of the organisation. And you'll see within the report that the next stage is that we've undertaken a full review of the workforce performance management framework to improve accountability, compliance and the quality of one-to-one and appraisal meetings. The aim is simple. Every employee's objective must now demonstrate a golden thread to the priorities set out in the corporate plan. Performance management is no longer just a tick box exercise, it's a living process. that holds staff and managers accountable for delivering real improvements. So that, I think, was after discussions with commissioners in December. That went to SLT today, and that will be coming before members in due course. So I just want to say that by way of reassuring members that the faults of the past have been addressed and are still being addressed. But what does this mean for residents? It means better leadership, better services and better value for money. It means public funds are being spent more wisely, paid decisions are based on clear and fair criteria, and every council officer is accountable for delivering results that matter to our community. These reforms are not just policies on paper, they are living documents that will continue to evolve to serve our residents better. This council has made real progress in tackling past failures, and I urge all members to continue supporting this important work as we rebuild trust with our residents, fairness and financial responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cockshaw, do you wish to speak? You have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Owing to changes in my shadow cabinet, I'll be deferring this to Councillor Howden to respond as shadow portfolio holder for finance.
Thank you. Councillor Houghton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have to say it's a slight surprise for me to be back on the Conservative front bench and under a leader 10 years younger than me. I take the opportunity to apologise to Councillor Johnson for various age jokes that I have made over the years, because I feel that some of them will now be levelled at myself. I think this is a good paper. I think that it's important that you ensure equity between the lowest paid in an organisation and the highest paid, and that's very sensible. I think that one thing that some local authorities are looking at doing now is the areas that sit outside the pay policy, but of individuals who could still be considered key workers. So, for example, domiciliary workers, foster carers, they are not council staff, therefore they're not reflected in the pay policy. But several local authorities are now starting to build documents to monitor the general health of how we look after the pay of people who sit formally outside the organisation. I think this paper represents very good progress over the last 3 or 4 years with regards to that internal equity. I think it could be a healthy step to look at how we ensure the equal health and equity of key workers for the council who are not formally part of the council structure. That being said, I do think it's good policy, and the Conservative group is happy to vote in favour of it.
Thank you. Councillor Spate, do you wish to speak? You have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I won't need that. Yes, speaking to colleagues, we are generally supportive of, and as Councillor Holland just said, there are many good things in there, and it's right that we're forward thinking. My one area of concern regarding pay and positions and the policy relating to that is I'm still not assured deep in my heart that we're in control of what we're actually running within this council. It's interesting, on the council jobs page today, there are 32 positions, which range from fairly low grade, which you find there are 9 that pay over £40,000. There are 6 that pay over £60,000. There are 3 lawyers who between them come to £200,000. And I'm sure that there'll be perfectly valid reasons as to why we need to employ 3 lawyers rather than go out and use what we previously thought were cheaper services. So I just hope that we will continue to be extremely prudent in the management of our staff. We're taking services away from residents all the time now, and it's going to get worse, and we must be absolutely sure, while we pay our people well, and that's what this is about, but we also need to be in control of our workforce.
Thank you, Councillor. Would any members like to speak on this report? Thank you. Councillor Muldowney, do you wish to have your right to reply? You have 2 minutes.
Just to say thank you for that suggestion, Councillor Howden. I think it's a good one, and I will take that forward in my further conversations with the Assistant Director for HR and OD, who's working on that part of the paper. So, and Councillor Spate, I think, you know, in terms of general services, members do have a role within the senior pay grade, but you know, other matters are really under the purview of the head of paid services. So, you know, we have to be careful that we don't overstep the mark there. So obviously, if through your membership of general services, you get a say on the areas which fall within councillors' purview. And I know that you will definitely use that right to speak when we have those meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Muldowney. I will now proceed to the recommendations to approve the Council's annual pay policy statement for 2025 to 26, attached as Appendix 1. Do members approve the recommendation? Thank you. Item 10, Councillor Muldowney, would you please introduce the report on HRA rent setting and budget for 2025 to 26. It can be found on pages 49 to 92, and you have 5 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm pleased to introduce the HRA rent setting and budget for 2025-26. This is a crucial financial plan that ensures we continue to provide safe, affordable and high-quality housing for our residents while maintaining the long-term sustainability of the housing revenue account. Madam Mayor, for too long, Thurrock's residents have suffered under housing crisis created by Conservative failure both nationally and locally. It is Labour that is now stepping up to fix it. Last week, I spoke to a single parent caring for 2 children with special needs and an elderly family member. Despite working hard, they can no longer afford private rent and are facing homelessness. Their only option is temporary accommodation. This is the Conservative legacy, families being forced into instability because of years of underinvestment in social housing. The Conservatives cut investment in social housing by 60% in 2010, sold off millions of council homes under right to buy without replacing them, and forced families into expensive temporary accommodation, with councils across the country now spending £732 million a year just to keep a roof over people's heads. And in Thurrock, for years, the Conservative administration promised 1,000 new council homes on their election leaflets year after year, and delivered, well, maybe not quite nothing, but certainly not 1,000 council houses. One portfolio holder after another, one failure after another. They also failed to use the right to buy receipts properly, meaning those funds were in danger of being sent back to government instead of being used to build homes, desperately needed homes. Now under Labour's leadership at both national and local level, we are taking action. This budget is about putting things right and ensuring that Thurrock's housing revenue account is financially strong, sustainable and delivering for our residents. This budget delivers 80 million for the Transforming Homes programme, which modernises and maintains existing council properties. Around 104 million for new council homes, ensuring we finally deliver the homes that Thurrock needs. In order to do this, we do have to increase rents and service charges. This year there's a 2.7% rent increase and service charge increase, which will keep the HRA financially stable so we can continue to fund essential services and meet rising costs. Full reinvestment of the right to buy receipts, thanks to the new Labour government, will allow us to borrow to use them, something the Conservatives failed to do. Under my leadership, we are ending the cycle of failure and decline. We're ensuring a HRA that's financially stable and capable of meeting the needs of our residents. We're investing in our existing homes because no one should have to live in substandard conditions. We're building new homes because we cannot allow another generation to be trapped in temporary accommodation. And we are taking responsibility because our residents deserve better. This budget ensures that we stop the cycle of bed poverty, which has been on the news recently, because no child should be sleeping on the floor. We tackle overcrowding. I don't know about other councillors, but certainly my inbox is always full of residents in contact with me about overcrowding. our families should be able to live in dignity in houses that are not overcrowded. And we are looking at ways to break the temporary accommodation crisis so parents are not left wondering where they will sleep next month. This is Labour in action, and I urge the Council to approve this budget. We are fixing the failures of the past and delivering the housing that Thurrock needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Muldowney. Councillor Haldon, do you wish to speak? You have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor, for your report. When you listen to Councillor Muldowney, every now and then, if you don't quite pay attention, you'll almost be lured into a belief that there is a genuine, sombre concern about housing issues or some of the problems facing the borough. And then you do a tally of how many times she uses the word Labour or Conservative. We got up to 10 on that occasion. In fact, one of your sentences, I think, was just 3 verbs in adjective and the word Conservative. At some stage, surely you want to put some degree of partisanship aside and just be quite forthright and upfront that this is the maximum possible rent increase that can possibly be levied on our constituents. Now, I am not personally violently opposed to the idea of having to increase rents from time to time. It's how you fund certain services. It has been a case time immemorial. I certainly remember all of the maximum rent increases that Councillor Worrell put through during her first stint as councillor, as portfolio holder for housing. And many of those did get used to fund quite laudable schemes. But the reality is, Madam Mayor, the Commissioner comments are clear that we need to refresh and review our policy on ethical debt collection. That hasn't been done. So amongst using the word Labour or Conservative 10 times in a single speech, Councillor Muldowney doesn't square the circle that on one hand the administration would like the maximum possible increase on our constituents, but on the other hand they've got a policy to ensure that our most vulnerable can actually afford to pay their bills that still needs to be refreshed. We are now living in a world where energy prices are going to go up above and beyond what was originally envisaged with the cap, that we've done away with winter fuel allowance for so many. Now we're putting the rent up by the maximum. We need a backstop of a robust policy to ensure that for people who want to pay but can't, we have got the sufficient support. And as the Commissioner comments say, that policy needs refreshing, but the maximum rent increase is being levied here as a result, just with a highly partisan speech in place of that review. And as a result, this group will be voting against it.
Thank you, Councillor Haldon. Councillor Spate, do you wish to speak? You have 4 minutes.
Yeah, very briefly. I probably share some of Councillor Holden's thoughts there. Other than possibly a couple of by-elections to come, we've got a couple of years where I was really hoping we'd start to work collegiately as a group of councillors and we'd see less politics and posturing and more achievement. And I hope that genuinely happens. Colleagues here all support this budget in terms of the HRA. We think it's sensible to be doing it. And I would add that I did welcome a public pronouncement from John Kent the other day, because we do have a sizable number of our residents who are in debt in relation to their council rents and things like that. And we're taking, I'm pleased to say, a humanitarian approach to that, and we're trying to work with these people who are struggling. We all know there is a cost of living crisis out there. I think it's possibly going to get worse before it gets better. And it's good to know that we do have that caring approach from within our teams within the council. Thank you.
Thank you. Would any member like to speak on this report? Councillor Johnson, you have 4 minutes.
I certainly won't need 4 minutes. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think you were banging on so many times about how many times we promised to build houses and didn't. I don't think your own record was particularly good, do you, to be perfectly honest? But I've got a question from it, because you said the Conservatives were selling off homes, and I didn't quite catch the number, under the right to buy scheme. Does that mean you're against the right to buy scheme and you're going to try and put something forward to remove it?
Sorry, she can't. Did anyone else wish to speak? No, Councillor Muldowney, do you wish to have your right to reply? You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not going to take any lectures from Councillor Howden because it's clear that the affordable housing crisis has been a result of Conservative policies. And to say that we're putting the rent up by the maximum, I just want to remind him that last year your administration put rents and service charges, both of them up by 7.7%. So I really think that you've got a cheek to be lecturing me. Anyway, that aside,
Sorry, can we not shout across the chamber, please?
that point aside, I do believe it's the right thing to do, and I thank Councillor Spate and his group for their support on this. We have to be responsible housing landlords. We have got a national affordable housing crisis. It is affecting lots of our residents. You know, people are waiting months, years to move. We've got massive pressures in temporary accommodation. We have to have a sustainable, financially sustainable and stable housing revenue account. If we default on our housing revenue account, we will have our housing stock taken away from us. And how does that help our residents? So I am pleased to be presenting this budget, which ensures that we've got proper reserves so that we can sustain any further financial shocks to this budget through any cost of living rises or any other sort of medium. It's sensible, it's sustainable. We have lots of things in place to help our residents if they are struggling financially. We have lots of support. There's a whole page of the report where you can look and see what help we offer to our residents to make sure that they can afford their tenancy. And actually, compared to private market rents, our rents are still very affordable, still very cheap, even with these modest rises this year.
Thank you, Councillor Muldowney.
Thank you.
I'll now proceed to the recommendations to endorse the decisions of Cabinet on the 12th of February 2025. And 2.1, approve the rent flexibility approach of formula rent plus 5% for new tenancies in properties governed by formula rent and 10% for new tenancies in supporting housing, as explained in paragraph 4.4 and 4.5 in this report. Please note this is only applicable in the event of relets. 2.2, approve the increase in rents in line with government policy on rents for social housing, as explained in paragraph 4.7 to 4.9 of this report, to 2.7%. 2.3, approve the increase in tenant and leasehold service charges and other HRA fees and charges or 2025 to 2026, as explained in paragraphs 4.11 and 4.14 of this report, as detailed in appendices 1 and 2. 2.4, approve the setting of an indicative balanced HRA budget for 2025 to 26 as per paragraph 4.34 and table 3 of this report. 2.5, approve the 5-year HRA business plan for the 2025-26 to 2029-30, as per paragraphs 4.35 to 4.38 of this report, as detailed in Appendix 3, and note that this is an extract from the 30-year HRA business plan. 2.6, note the ongoing HRA capital programme composed of 2 main strands, transforming houses and homes, and the demolition, rebuild and acquisitions programme, of which the next 5 years are presented at 80 million and 104 million pounds respectively. Approval of these is sought via a separate Cabinet report that will be presented to February 2025 Cabinet as part of the Council's overall capital programme. Do members approve? Right, we will need to take a vote on this because people have expressed their view that they will be voting against. So could I...
Madam Mayor, the Conservative group are just voting against 2.2 and 2.3. so you don't need to call separate votes on each point.
Okay, so, so shall we do 2.2 and 2.3 first, and then I'll do the rest as a group? Okay, so those of you who approve or agree with 2.2, could you please show? Those against, please show. Thank you. Any abstentions? Thank you. And 2.3 was the one you said, yeah? Okay, for 2.3, those in favour, please show. And those against, please show. Thank you. Are there any abstentions? No, thank you. So, do I need to say the figures, numbers? Right, for the others. Okay, and now for all the other points, do people agree? Do members agree? Thank you. Item 11, final capital programme report 2025 to 26 to 2029 to 30. Councillor Muldowney, would you please introduce the report that can be found on pages 93 to 124? You have 5 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm pleased to introduce this year's capital programme, which is obviously a cut-down programme, but we think that we've managed to put the right things in there this year. So I think it's safe to say, and I hope we would all agree, that under past leadership, the council was bitten off more than it could chew with capital projects. It undertook the overspend on the A13 widening, the debacle of the Stamford-Le Hope train station, the ongoing issues with this building, the list goes on. The council's capital programme was mismanaged, leading to cost overruns, project delays and financial instability, problems clearly identified in the Best Value Inspection report. So this year, we've moved forward, we've taken control of the programme. Some of the things that we've done this year is to introduce tighter financial oversight, robust governance and a clear focus on only essential deliverable projects. So, and one that prioritises key investments that will improve services for residents. Despite the financial constraints, we have protected and prioritised the most critical areas, including fleet renewal and highways maintenance to ensure that our road network is kept in good condition and council services operate efficiently. We have got money in there for the replacement of the Orchard Road footbridge in South Ockenden, addressing a long-standing infrastructure concern that poses safety risks. We're looking at upgrades at the Waste Recycling Centre, investing in education case management system, and as my colleagues I'm sure are delighted about, 11 million commitment to finish Stamford-Le Hope station, moving this much delayed project forward. We've also looked at some invest to save options, so we're making enhancements at Grange Waters, which is linked to a key budget saving, and thanks to scrutiny for having a look at that one, and improvements to the Thameside complex, investing in a key community and cultural asset. So there is some good news in this report, as well as obviously it's very cut down compared to what we did in the past. But it does represent a major step forward in how this council manages its capital investment. Sort of some things I would just like to say to reassure members that we are changing our approach around capital investment is that just because we've got this money, we're not going to be handing it out. There has to be a full business case, and officers will have to prove that they're ready to go ahead. And there's going to be very, very tight monitoring of any slippage. We had quite a lot of slippage in this year's capital programme, which we obviously inherited from the previous administration. So I think this is a well-structured, financially responsible capital programme. I wish we had more money to spend. We don't, but I think we've done the best with what we've been able to put together in the programme, and I urge Council to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Maldani. Councillor Haljan, do you wish to speak? You have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Maldani, for your report and what I strongly suspect was a slightly edited speech. There is a great deal of good news in the speech. There are a couple of minor stylistic issues I would point to. Some of the references to a capital budget extending to 2030. I think given the fact that we know the council won't exist for much longer, one of the problems Thurrock has clearly had since it became a unitary in the 90s is over-promising and under-delivering. So I think that there are a couple of issues there. I would say I do have a slight concern regarding the fact that when it comes to certain capital issues, the advice has changed quite radically from the previous administration to this administration regarding the viability of certain projects. And you know, I pick up on one quote that you said that we have taken control of the capital programme. This is not a partisan point at all. What I would say is that there is always a tendency from anyone who is in administration, because of how hard they work, because of how many hundreds of hours they spend poring over an issue, they always lure themselves into a belief that they've got more control than they have. I see the leader of the council nodding away. I would certainly reflect, I always believed I had far more control when I was in cabinet than clearly at times I actually did. So there does require a strong degree, whenever we discuss an item like this, of humility to understand there are certain things that councillors can control and there are certain things that we cannot. And therefore I would just temper a degree of her exuberance. But on the whole, I can agree with far more of this paper than I disagree with, and as a result, the Conservative Group are happy to vote for it.
Thank you, Councillor Halden. Councillor Spate, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Madam.
You have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Again, having a degree of discussion with colleagues on this document, I again sort of echo what Councillor Holden just said. There are bits in there that we agree with and bits that we're not, but there's nothing hugely, well, there are a couple of things that I'm going to touch on. What concerns me is I find this a very woolly document. I think the lack of detail, the lack of real budget estimation is there. For example, we just look at, take Stamford Railway Station, £11 million. Does anybody in this room know what we're going to do with Stamford Railway Station at this point in time? Because I'm the ward councillor and I haven't got a clue. So I don't know how you can suddenly come up with a figure of £11 million when, I mean, are we going to build lifts? Are we going to put a new bridge in? Are we going to have the turning circle? Are we going to have this? Are we going to have that? We've no idea. Now, I agree it's prudent to put a big figure in, and I think £11 million is a very, very big figure, because I think what we'll do will fall far short of what we were originally going to have, and I think that's probably sensible. I'm also concerned, we've got £2.5 million put on one side there for A13 widening. How on earth, what's that all about? Because as far as I was concerned, the A13 project was completed a couple of years ago. I drive that road on a regular daily basis, several times a day sometimes, and it looks a finished piece of work to me. So why are we spending £2.5 million on that? I have no idea. There's no explanation, it seems to me. But that all talks about, it's about risk. And what concerns me is that as councillors, we have been taught to recognise the problem of risk within this authority. It's been a key four-letter word. And yet you look at the summary of risk implications, which is outlined on pages 102 and page 103, and there are 6 key risk sectors. 1 is green, which is good. The other 5 are all amber. I'm delighted they're not red. But is that really a solid foundation that we have 5 main sectors of our capital budget where we believe risk is involved, because we've been told we've got to get risk out of our system. So I appreciate beyond words the amount of work that Dawn and her team have had to put in over the last few months. It's been phenomenal what they've got to do, and I will touch on that later on in the evening. But I think, therefore, we've sort of rushed through this capital, and I know we have to have a capital budget, but I don't think we'll deliver half the projects in here in the next 12 months. I really don't, or even the next 2 years. And I go with the word woolly, unstructured. Risk is not risk averse, and therefore, on a personal level, we will vote out in the group how they wish. But on a personal level, I cannot support this capital budget because I just don't think it's a good piece of work.
Thank you. Would any member like to speak on this report? Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm really delighted that the £11 million is sitting in there for Stamford Hope Station, and actually it's been costed out already, and that is what it's coming to, with a bit more for contingency that we're finding. The plans for the station will be coming forward, and you will be seeing them after they've gone to Cabinet, which is due to come shortly. So I'm confident that it is £11 million. There's been a lot of hard work put in Stamford Hope Station, i.e. working with Network Rail and C2C, very much on board on what we're going to do. The station itself will not be as it was like they thought it was going to be with the turnaround and things like that, Councillor Spate, because it's not. But it is going to be a practical, workable station, and one that's not been just took down and ripped apart with any other thought about how they were going to put it back up. And also the fact that we bought daybreak windows with Japanese knotweed in it, that now we're paying £35,000 to actually clear, and then we're going to be clearing that site as well for that in that cost of money. So me personally, I'm really happy that this is coming forward for the residents of Stamford Le Hope, and I honestly think that they deserve this station. They haven't asked for the world. All they've asked for is their station back as it was. That's all they've ever asked for. Nothing more, nothing less. I'm really happy as well about the Orchard Road footbridge that was in planning about 3 years ago. Nothing ever came forward on that, and now we're actually kind of come forward on that in Ockenden. So I think that's a really good thing to do. So this has been worked on. This is workable. This is what they said we can deliver within that envelope. So, and when it comes, I will be sharing it with you. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Morris-Cook.
Yes, thank you. It would be very wrong of me not in my portfolio to mention that I'm delighted that there's £152,000 that has been highlighted for the Thames side to carry on looking at a condition report. And I think this is yet another confirmation that as a Labour administration on the budget night, we are not looking to cut or close the Thames side theatre.
Thank you. Councillor Muldowney, do you wish to have your right of reply? You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have to disagree with opposition, particularly Councillor Spate, that this is woolly. It's not at all woolly, and in fact, we have tightened up controls. I take the point from Councillor Howden, although I wish you had have thought about it at the time when you were actually in office, that we should always be humble and check everything and make sure that we don't repeat the mistakes of the past. Councillor Spate, I'm not sure what to say to you, really. I will say that the A13 costs in there, we're still compensating landowners. I will double-check that with Dawn, but I believe that that's what those payments are for. So, you know, it's another legacy issue that we're still having to pay for and residents are still having to pay for. I'm amazed that you're going to vote against funds to build your own railway station after campaigning so long for it to be built. But there you go, that is your prerogative. And I just need to say about risk management. that it's not about eliminating risk. You cannot eliminate risk. Risk management is about making sure that you are cognizant of the risks of any project that you're undertaking and that you do everything that you can to ameliorate, reduce or eliminate those risks. With any project, there are always going to be risks that you can never completely eliminate it. And perhaps, Councillor Spate, if you had have actually attended the risk management training, you might understand a little bit more about risk and how risks are managed and how as members we can get proper assurances that risks are being properly managed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I will now proceed to the recommendations to approve. The proposed new capital projects in line with the 2025 to 26 stipulations and criteria as set out in Table 3, Appendix B. In principle, the proposed financing of the additions to the capital programme as set out in Table 4, Appendix C. The draft capital programmes of 316. Oh no, sorry. I've got a full stop on my sheet. 316.718 million over the 5-year period from 2025 to 26 to 2029 to 30, as set out in Table 4, Appendix C, and the implementation of the governance improvement section, paragraph 4.5. Do members approve? Oh, yeah, sorry, we'll take a vote, Councillor Spate. Those in favour, please show. Thank you. Are those against, please show. Thank you. Any abstentions? Yeah. Thank you. Item 12, Annual Treasury Management Strategy Statement 2025 to 26. Councillor Muldowney, would you please introduce the report that can be found on pages 125 to 148? You have 5 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Colleagues, today we consider the Treasury Management Strategy for 2025-26, which is a critical part of putting Thurrock's finances back on the right track after years of reckless financial mismanagement. Let's be absolutely clear, the debt that they've left behind is still a millstone around this council's neck, and it will be so for many years to come. The headline figures tell the story. 64 million, that's how much we're spending just to service our debt. Not to pay it down, not to reduce it, but just to service it. That's nearly 40% of our total core funding. Will go towards paying off this debt instead of funding services. That means for every £10 the council receives, nearly £4 goes straight to debt repayments. This is why we still need exceptional financial support from the government. Without it, we wouldn't be able to deliver essential services or even pay our staff. The previous administration borrowed excessively, invested recklessly, and failed to put any proper financial controls in place. They didn't even make provisions for minimum revenue provision. So that's the money that you set aside, like you would with a mortgage, to pay down the money you owe on your mortgage every month. There were no arrangements for that. Under this administration and under my leadership, we're turning that ship around. We have a clear and responsible plan based on 3 priorities, which should have been the 3 priorities that were the keystone of the Treasury Management Strategy. First of all, security. Making sure that every pound of public money is protected. Secondly, liquidity, ensuring that we have funds available when we need them. And only thirdly, yield, what we're making, getting the best return possible, but never at the expense of security and accessibility. For those members who've previously asked whether the council is getting the best interest rates possible on our funds, let me reassure you, we are. Every penny is being managed responsibly under these priorities to ensure we are making the most of what we have while keeping risk to an absolute minimum. Further work that we've started this year, but we'll be going through Finance Recovery Board to next year, is looking at how we restructure our debt so that we can try and reduce some of the interest payments that we have to pay, so that hopefully over the course of years we won't be reliant on exceptional financial support. Crucially, it's not just me that's saying this. The commissioners have recognised the progress we are making. I work closely with the Finance Commissioner through the Finance Recovery Board to steady the Council's finances and steer us back towards long-term financial sustainability. The damage done by the past administration will take years to fix, but residents can now have confidence that the Council finances are in safe hands. We are taking the tough but necessary decisions to put Thurrock back on a stable footing, and will continue to do so. I therefore ask members to support this Treasury Management Statement, ensuring we continue on this path of financial recovery. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Haldon, do you wish to speak? You have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Muldowney, for your report. If it puts you more at ease for the rest of the evening, I've replaced my Councillor Muldowney says Labour or Conservative tally with how many times Councillor Muldowney says my leadership. 4, by the way. This is a good report. There's nothing objectionable in it. Certainly the collapse of the financial strategy, which indeed the party opposite voted for in favour 3 times, continues to be a challenge today. I think this report balances prudent control of finances with still trying to remain relatively ambitious with investments and borrowing and Treasury management in general. I appreciate the fact that this is highly technical work, and it probably takes officers far, far greater in the back room trying to prepare such highly technical apparatus. So to all officers involved, thank you very much. And the Conservative Group is happy to support this outstanding example of Councillor Muldowney's leadership.
Thank you. Councillor Spate, do you wish to speak?
Madam Mayor, I'm not going to speak as spokesperson for the group, so I reserve my right to speak as an individual councillor when it's open.
Thank you. Does any member wish to speak? Councillor Spate.
It was important to make that point because we don't whip people, we don't tell people what to do, and there are differing opinions in the group. Personally, I cannot support this budget because I believe it is based on unaudited and substantially flawed data. We've seen in the last few days tabulated figures being brought forward that have acknowledged that there have been changes and then changes and then changes so many months later. I don't think we've really got a grip on our audited finances in this council. And so much so that far from being a financially balanced, we have just currently agreed to borrow £8 million to cover an operating shortfall. And that's aside from borrowing £64 million just to pay the interest on our debt. Despite assurances to the contrary, I see unaddressed profligacy and waste on an almost daily basis. Those who put this project together have been brave enough to talk the talk, and I hope they are successful and enjoy the walk through the next 12 civic months. I will also pay tribute to what I have seen and heard is some assiduous work by Dawn Calvert and her team. She has the equivalent problem of trying to piece together a 5,000-piece jigsaw on the deck of the Titanic after it hit the iceberg. There are laudable intentions in the budget, and I cannot in all conscience object to them, so I am in the enviable position as part of a minority opposition to have my cake and eat it. To conclude, we are on the road to nowhere and are still going to be hundreds of millions of pounds in debt at the end of that road. We are instructed that we have to produce a balanced budget statement, but in practical terms, is it even worth the paper that it's written on? I cannot support the maths and presented facts behind the budget, but I know it's concocted with the best of intentions, and if I do not feel minded to object to it either, so I will be abstaining on the principal recommendations. That's me.
Thank you, Councillor Spate. Can I just check that you were speaking on the Treasury Management Strategy? Or were you speaking on the revenue budget and final medium
I have similar
term?
things to say on both, so I won't say it on the second.
Thank you. Does any other member wish to speak? Councillor Muldowney, do you wish to have your right of reply? You have 2 minutes.
I'd just like to thank Councillor Howden for his very flattering inventory of every word that I say. You know, maybe you should get out more. Councillor Spate, I mean, you know, I feel a bit bad about refuting. I was going to do a bit of a barnstorming speech refuting the fact that you say that there's no substance to this report. I know the work that's gone in this year, and I do want to thank Dawn and the whole team. Nobody could have worked harder than the team this year, you know, the relationship that we've had has been very, very productive, and I do feel we've got monthly Treasury management meetings now, which track the Treasury management. There's so many things that have been put in place behind the scenes that members don't necessarily see. And obviously, Dawn is a million miles from Sean Clark. They couldn't be different. They're like chalk and cheese. So, Councillor Spate, I'm sorry that you think it's all woolly, but then you gave a speech on the wrong paper, so I'm not sure there's anything else that I need to say on that. We have inherited a financial catastrophe, a 1.3 billion debt and a 470 million deficit, and a budget so broken that nearly 40% of our core funding next year goes to just servicing the debt. So, yes, you're correct, Councillor Spate. The council is still in a very precarious situation, but we are turning the ship, and we are going to do more. We will work just as hard next year to make sure that we bring the council back into financial sustainability. I'm sure that's all something that we can all agree on, that we need to go in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now proceed to the recommendations that Council approve. 2.1, the proposed Treasury Management Strategy and prudential indicators for 2025 to 26, 2026 to 27, 2027 to 28, 2028 to 29, and 2029 to 30 in 11.1, 12.4, 15.6, 15.8, 15.9, 16.16 and 17.2. 2.2, the proposed change in the authorised limit 2024 to 25 to 1.4 billion, the approval of a 1.4 billion authorised limit for 2025 to 26, and the following 4 years as set out in section 15.10. 2.3, the proposed MRP policy for 2025 to 26 as set out in section 13 and will be reviewed for 2026 to 27. The proposed borrowing strategy is set out in section 15. The proposed investment policy is set out in 16. The actual prudential indicators for 2023 to 24 as shown in Appendix A. Do members... Oh, of course, yes, sorry, we're going to have to take a vote again. Okay, those in agreement, please show. Those against, please show. I thought he said he was going to abstain. Any abstentions? Thank you. Item 13, final revenue budget 2025 to 26 and final medium-term financial strategy 2025 to 26 to 2028 to 29. Leader, would you please introduce the report that can be found on pages 149 to 212? You have 20 minutes to speak.
Madam Mayor, I'm pleased to move the final revenue budget for 25-26 and the final medium-term financial strategy for the period 25-26 to 28-29. This budget that we're discussing this evening has been put together against the very toughest of backdrops. A backdrop of crippling debt, a revenue budget that was spending way beyond its means, and a medium-term financial strategy that was simply not fit for purpose. Cabinet has worked hard over the last 9 months to start to reshape the way the council works, and in doing so to change the relationship between the council and our residents, our businesses and our partners. And I genuinely appreciate the many, many hours of painstaking hard work that's been undertaken by all portfolio holders in coming up with the budget proposals this evening, proposals on which we are all agreed. I especially want to thank Councillor Muldowney, the portfolio holder of resources, for her painstaking and detailed work and leadership in creating our budget. I appreciate and thank all officers who have worked so hard on these proposals, especially Dawn Calvert, our Section 151 officer, who has done some amazing work in crafting this budget at the same time as starting to stabilise the finances of the council, transforming her small finance team and ensuring that we deliver on the savings that we agreed this time last year. And Madam Mayor, this budget is the result of really strong collaboration between members of all parties and no party. So I thank all members of Overview and Scrutiny committees and the chairs of those committees for the constructive role that they've played in shaping the budget before us this evening. I particularly want to thank Councillor Ben Maney for his work as chair of the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee and for his efforts and the way that he chaired the lengthy but really positive joint scrutiny committee meeting that we had before Christmas. Madam Mayor, this budget allows £176 million for delivering services for our residents next year. It identifies £18.2 million worth of savings and relies on a 5% council tax increase. And I have to remind all members that balancing the budget, controlling the debt, and working together to make the council financially sustainable is a duty and a responsibility on each and every one of us. It is a legal requirement for us, as it is for any council, to set an annual budget that is to be balanced or at least fully funded. Clearly, we are regrettably once again not able to set a budget that is fully funded without relying on exceptional financial support from the government. The level of support that we will require next year is £72.1 million. And it puts into sharp focus those two linked problems that we are faced with when it comes to setting our budget and dealing with our finances. Firstly, is the level of the debt that we have inherited is simply unsustainable. That debt today stands at £867 million. Just to service that debt, not to pay it down, we need to take £64.3 million of exceptional financial support. The nature of that financial support means the debt will grow, and by the end of the next financial year, it will stand at £1 billion. The second problem is we inherited a general fund budget that had been set for too many years without the available resources to properly fund it. That means that even after we have identified savings of £18.2 million, we still require £7.8 million of government support to be able to deliver a reasonable level of services for our residents. Madam Mayor, this budget reflects the real world in which the council is operating. It sets out very clearly the reality of the issues facing us, and it starts to plan a course for dealing with them. It very clearly sets out some of the fundamental truths about the council and the environment that we are operating in. And it is essential that we do that. The financial collapse of this council can be traced back to those budgets that failed to reflect the reality the council was facing. Indeed, the Best Value Inspection report sets out many instances where budgets of the past have departed from reality, where they agreed levels of spending for services that just couldn't be met from the available funding, where they overinflated the level of income expected and airbrushed out failed investments, and where they failed to make adequate provision for paying back debts. As a result, too often, those budgets, far from setting out a solid plan for how the council would fund and provide services, they simply failed to provide any value at all. Madam Mayor, none of us can allow us to return to those ways. So the medium-term financial strategy, which is before us this evening, is an essential part of our budget setting process. It sets out assumptions around the core funding we will receive, funding in the form of council tax, business rates, and non-specific government grants. It identifies the savings requirements for future years, a total of £41 million over the life of the MTFS. It sets out the predicted operating budget for future years and identifies the need for £40 million of growth to fund essential services in the future. That growth includes an increase of £4 million to fund our waste services, as we have more homes to collect waste from, and it's built in the cost of re-procuring our waste disposal contract. It's also taken a realistic view on the level of inflation. It includes a pressure of £14.7 million to properly fund adult social care, as we have an ageing population, many of whom require complex care. It takes into consideration our young people needing care who are transitioning into adulthood. And it makes realistic assumptions on inflation, pay awards, and the impact in the rise of the minimum wage. £6.2 million is included to reflect the pressures in children's services, particularly the increased number and the cost of placements for vulnerable young people. And it includes the massive pressure that we have, as do all councils, around homelessness, where we are estimating the cost will be an additional £13 million over the next 4 years. Finally, it sets out very starkly the cost of servicing our crippling debt, Treasury costs of over £266 million over the lifetime of the MTFS, all of which feeds into the predicted need for further exceptional financial support of over £260 million for the next 4 years, and brings the total capital direction for the 7 years from 2022 to 23 to 28-29 to £691 million. Madam Mayor, setting any medium-term financial strategy is challenging because there are so many uncertainties around grant allocations, around future local government financial settlements, around unforeseen national or international events, economic uncertainties, variable interest rates. These challenges make it all the more important that we have a strong, forward-looking financial plan against which we can measure those uncertainties and make sound decisions. And that's what this MTFS does. It is as robust as it possibly can be, but inevitably it will change over the years ahead. So we will regularly revisit it and regularly update it. Madam Mayor, given the budget gap of £40 million and given debt rising to above £1 billion, it remains almost impossible to see a future where the council is able to be financially self-sustainable. That makes it all the more important that we seize the opportunity afforded to us by our inclusion in the government's priority programme for devolution and local government reorganisation. Because the truth is, try as hard as we might to make it work, Thurrock is too small to be sustainable. With a population of 178,000, we just don't have the capacity or economies of scale to deliver the good quality services our residents deserve. And that crippling debt, sitting on the shoulders of those 178,000 residents, will always be an impossible burden to bear. And the government has made it clear. Thurrock Council, along with Essex County Council, Southend-on-Sea City Council and the 12 districts across the county of Essex, will be abolished. Madam Mayor, this council will in a year or two cease to exist. So the government is looking for us to work together on developing proposals for new councils, councils with a population of 500,000 or above that will have the capacity to be sustainable and to deliver good quality services. We have started that work, and I am confident that with partners across the county of Essex, we will be able to meet the government's exacting timetable to submit our preliminary plans for local government reorganisation by the 21st of March and full proposals by the end of September. And I have to be clear, Madam Mayor, I don't expect this government, or any government, to ride to the council's rescue, kind of like John Wayne and the 7th Cavalry coming over the hill, writing off our debts. That's just not going to happen. But there will be a negotiation to be had on how we deal with debt. And that's not just Thurrock's debt, Madam Mayor. Others have debt levels that are just too high as well. I really do understand how difficult change on this scale will be, and I know that for many people it will be unsettling, people will be unsure and nervous about the future. But this really is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for our small borough to become part of something that is stronger, more resilient, more ambitious, and better able to deliver for all our residents. And I'm absolutely committed to making sure that we grasp this opportunity. We will also meet the timetable for devolution. The government's statutory consultation on creating a mayoral combined authority is underway, and we will, with our colleagues at Southend-on-Sea and Essex County Council, agree detailed proposals by spring, late spring, with a view to concluding the legal processes by the end of 2025. The Shadow Combined Authority will be established early in 2026, and the first Mayor of Greater Essex elected in May next year. Madam Mayor, I think it's really important that we all understand just what devolution is and that we keep it separate in our minds at least from local government reorganisation. So devolution is passing down powers currently exercised by central government and its agencies to the local level. It also involves the greater coordination of some of those powers that are exercised by individual councils. Things such as transport and infrastructure, housing delivery and strategic planning, economic development and regeneration, environmental protection and climate change, health and well-being, public sector reform, public safety, adult skills. Madam Mayor, devolution has the potential to give us the tools we need to significantly grow the economy of Essex, to create good quality new jobs and give our residents the skills they need to get those jobs. And the fact is, Essex is a county with immense opportunities. Together, we're home to two nationally significant growth corridors along the Thames Estuary and the UK Innovation Corridor. We're a major trading and international gateway with two free ports. That's our own Thames Freeport and Freeport East. Our economy contains a number of key growth sectors, including construction and retrofit, clean energy, advanced manufacturing, digitech, life sciences, and culture and creative industries. And devolution will give us the chance to maximise the impact of all those sectors and more to create more high-value jobs, to improve public transport, and to increase productivity. And Madam Mayor, just on productivity, if we could increase productivity in Essex to that of the average across the South East, that would result in an economy in Essex that is 17% larger than it is today. And a larger economy means more jobs, better jobs, and more money in people's pockets. And I think that's a prize that's well worth pursuing. So for the next couple of years, we're going to be facing enormous challenges. As a council in statutory intervention, we will continue with our commitment to our ongoing improvement and recovery journey. We will continue to work to rescue the council's finances as far as we are able, and we will continue to take every avenue available to recover those investment monies we believe were misappropriated. We will work with partners to create an effective strategic mayoral authority that delivers for all of Essex, and to create a new council for the people of Thurrock that will allow them the best quality services possible. At the same time, we must continue to deliver to the best of our abilities for the residents of Thurrock today and ensure we are in the strongest position possible for a smooth transition to what other arrangements might come next. Madam Mayor, none of us came into public life to cut services and to face such difficult negative decisions as we have before us this evening. However, that is the hand we have been dealt, and we must do the right thing for our residents. That's why these proposals are based on some very clear core principles that uphold the values that I and my colleagues believe in. We believe that residents have to come first. And in coming first, we do our very best to protect frontline services. That where we're making changes to services, we must minimise any adverse impacts of those changes on the daily lives of our residents, and that we tackle waste and inefficiency in the council, we streamline management and reduce bureaucracy. That is what these proposals represent, an honest, forthright and focused set of actions to reduce costs, crack down on waste and duplication, protect those things that matter most to our residents, and levy a council tax increase of 5%, a welcome contrast with the 8% and 10% of the last 2 years. Madam Mayor, I urge all members to support this budget this evening.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Coxall, do you wish to speak? You have 15 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And in responding to the budget this evening, can I first thank Councillor Jeffreys for his service as leader of the Conservative group, especially on a personal level for giving me the opportunity to serve in his cabinet in a fantastic role for health and adult social care, and also to serve alongside him as his own deputy leader. Leadership in any form is never easy, and it does take a personal toll on oneself. As am I equally grateful to the Labour administration. We may disagree on minor things, but I know all of you have put your heart and soul into actually delivering a budget, and I know all of us, at the end of the day, want what is best for Thurrock. I also thank the Leader of the Council for his kind comments for my elevation to the position of Leader of the Opposition. I'd just like to note, I don't intend to be disappointing to my group or this chamber, much like the budget I see before me this evening. Madam Mayor, this budget started with really good intentions, and but as a result, it's a budget for yesterday's man. We started trying to set a balanced budget for this year, and the next, and then the next. However, this administration becomes scared and decided to beg the government to call off May's elections. They got their wish. Like many across Essex, I have then pondered what this actually means for local government reform. It has become the only game in the borough, and it means the end of this council. They've made the request, but they have yet to show a budget that is ready for that request. I've long been an advocate for local government reform, and councillors across the chamber would know my previous apprehensions at general services. Having fewer councils is good for the Essex taxpayer. We have the prospect to deliver better services for our residents. However, that means we need a completely different type of budget. We need a budget that seeks to maximise Thurrock's potential in this new reality. For example, Madam Mayor, we need to make provisions for the following. Undoubtedly, a new council will seek to manage its new assets that it has acquired. Do we need to invest in certain community assets to ensure they're 100% suitable for the community, and in turn, actually protected by the new authority? The massive cost for forecasting the economic viability of certain services to ensure that Thurrock keeps its family silver, unlike the last set my father found on eBay. There are things that this Labour budget do not do. But what is absurd about this position is that this administration asked to dodge the voters in May. They knew they may get local government reform, and yet they did not plan a transformation budget accordingly. Rather, this administration has chosen to burn through our contingency reserves with no details of how much local government reorganisation and devolution will cost the Thurrock taxpayer. You wanted democracy to be denied, but you didn't plan for what to do next. This budget does not prepare Thurrock Council staff, services or the community to be positioned well going into this process. There are only 23 days left to submit initial proposals, and today we had a really good productive meeting around establishing the cross-party working group on devolution and reorganisation. However, I'm very mindful this deadline is looming very quickly. It is clear we have a ship and we've got a captain, but we haven't paid the navigator to get us to where we want to go yet. Councillors across this chamber and our residents watching are still none the wiser to what our council is or will be proposing. It would be remiss of me not to point out that other councils have called emergency full councils just so all members can discuss the subject rapidly. Several councils have actually put forward considered plans, and yet here we are. All councillors in this chamber deserve the opportunity to talk about the future of the borough, and this budget needs to facilitate the outcomes of such a debate. Madam Mayor, let me turn to some specifics in this budget. I'm alarmed to see the return of smoke and mirrors to the budget setting process. The last Conservative budget, when I was a member of Cabinet, was an unpopular one. I didn't shy away from that. I got into politics to make difficult decisions. I know doing what is right is better than doing what is popular. However, this is a far cry from the Labour budget in front of us this evening. Suddenly, the powers that be have decided that the Thames side is in fine economic health. That was not the assessment we were given. It turns out we have ample cash to make investments into new sites like Grange Waters. That was not the advice we were given. Thurrock Council and efficiency is not something many people recognise at times. How do you cut a six-figure sum from the highways budget and expect great efficiencies with no reduction in service? And it seems, before overview and scrutiny challenged it, we felt we could afford vital posts such as energy officers. I am not sure, ever, in the history of local government, anyone other than Labour has ever suggested what we desperately need to address all our problems was a light bulb czar. Madam Mayor, there are many other areas in this budget I think have been left unexplored. This year, many of our older residents and loved ones have been left deeply frightened when the government cut their winter fuel allowance. Thurrock Council was able to give out some limited support from a direct government grant. There is no way of knowing if this will be repeated next year. Concerns for our older residents have only increased again in recent days, when it seems that the pending energy increase is going to be greater than forecasted. With these things in mind, we cannot just pretend that everything is all okay for our most at-risk citizens. If Labour can find money to invest in Grange Waters or to propose to fund light bulb bazaars, then I'm sure we can find something to actually support those who've paid into this system their entire lives and are now left deeply worried by the actions of this government. Finally, I would finally turn to the biggest rising tide, which is keeping the majority of our sector up at night: homelessness. We've had an increasing national problem before, and with now a flatlining economy, things are only going to get worse. Joblessness and homelessness are a human tragedy, but for us, it is also a budgetary disaster. There is scant detail in front of us this evening. Madam Mayor, I was hoping, despite some minor disagreements over the budget, I would turn up to find new provisions to ensure that the budget readied us for the situation Labour has now created for us. This is not the case. Essex has been planning, Basildon Council have been lobbying, and Thurrock under Labour seems to be being left behind. I would say to the last person who leaves the council, do turn off the lights, but I fear there may be no one left now that Labour's precious light bulb bazaar has been vetoed. Therefore, the Conservatives will not be voting for this budget this evening.
Thank you. Councillor Spate, do you wish to speak? You have 4 minutes.
Not on behalf of colleagues, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Do any members wish to speak? Councillor Hartstein and
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This budget is more than just numbers on a page. It is a reflection of our shared vision and for an inclusive and forward-thinking Thurrock. This budget prioritises essential services that directly impact the quality of life for our residents. Our investments in local communities, in our most vulnerable residents, in social care and in central education services must not merely be seen as expenditures, but as investments into the future of our community. These will ensure that every individual, regardless of their background or circumstances, has access to the support and opportunities they need to thrive in Thurrock. Despite the enormous savings we have had to make due to years of financial mismanagement, I am proud that officers and cabinet members have worked so hard to protect frontline services, and none more so than within my portfolio of children's services and education. It would be remiss of me, Madam Mayor, not to take this opportunity once again to mention the fantastic Ofsted outcome, rating our children's services as outstanding. This shows that even when in government intervention with little or no money, we can still achieve amazing things to be proud of here in Thurrock. This budget reflects prudent financial management. We have made difficult yet necessary decisions to ensure that our expenditures are aligned with our strategic priorities. By maximising efficiencies and eliminating waste, we have crafted a budget that is both responsible and transformative, keeping the people of Thurrock at the centre. In conclusion, I urge you all to support this budget. It is a comprehensive, balanced and forward-thinking financial plan that embodies our commitment to the people of Thurrock. Together, we move forward with confidence, knowing that this budget will pave the way for a stronger and more equitable future for all our residents of Thurrock. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
thank you. Councillor Byrne.
Yep, I'm going off piste as normal. So, with the exceptional financial support to the tune of millions of pounds, should we all be asking, is 4.99% enough? However, wearing my council hat and residents' hat, I say we cannot continue to make residents pay for the Conservatives' financial incompetence for many, many, many years. As for the party that is saying they were putting a zero hike, I say they must have a Tory ex-leader as their financial advisor. Wonderful news to see investment going into our theatre. This is music to my ears. It has been handed finally a lifeline. To think just over a year ago it was a toss-up between the Tories closing it or the ex-deputy mayor giving it away to his chums in Barking. Also, great news to see our station in the budget, although we really shouldn't be seeing 11 million wasted in a Labour budget. Our fully functional station bulldozed in a knee-jerk reaction over DP World's funding. Another financial embarrassment residents are paying for because of the Conservatives' financial incompetence. Is this a brave or foolish budget? Only next year will answer that question. I just hope the numbers have been fully audited and they haven't been worked out on the back of a fag packet. With the arts and our station issues finally being addressed, for me it's a friendly budget and continues to confirm that the east of the borough is very much on the TBC's radar. One question I asked, the misspent 600k for DP World's funding for the station still remains the elephant in the room, as they are perfectly entitled to claim it back. Has this been accrued in the numbers, or are we simply relying on the goodwill of our friends at the poll to write it off? One thing I noticed during these speeches, Councillor Mulvey only said many times behind the scenes. I didn't count that many times like Councillor Howden, but would ask what happened to openness and transparency. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm sure at some point you'll inform this chamber that as a group we haven't put forward an alternative budget, so maybe we don't deserve a say, but that is something that you and your group are all too guilty of in previous years. But I know two wrongs don't make a right. So in the spirit of openness and honesty, I don't think this budget would have been too different if we were presenting it ourselves. However, in my opinion, there are too many what-ifs that come to mind in the overall proposal. So I thought in place of an alternative budget, I'd point out what I believe needs far more explanation as to what might occur over the next year and beyond because of some of the decisions made in the capital programme that do affect this budget. There's quite obviously been a significant model or seed change of which I certainly do not feel has been explained to full council. As only last year as an administration, we were advised, and I only use the word advised as I can't think of a stronger alternative, that council tax for Thurrock must be brought up to the mean for Essex. I do not believe that has happened, yet we do not appear to be in any better position relating to paying down our debt. As the last administration, we were informed that the Thameside Theatre was not fit for purpose and had to close. Now, while I accept that £152,000 to carry out improvement works following a condition survey in May 24 is not an enormous amount of money in the grand scheme of things, but I cannot help wondering why the condition survey in 24 didn't throw up the same cost reported to us, bringing the theatre into 21st century and making it fit for purpose, being millions of pounds, as that is what was reported to the cabinet I was in. I also mentioned Grange-Waters, as we were informed that while the facility did break even, it had to close as the cost of making the place safe and bringing it up to date could also run into millions. A facility that none of our local schools use, as Stubbers offers a similar cost for usage with far superior facilities, and that any of our SEND students who use the facility could not find alternative sites for similar cost. Now, overall, I'm happy that some of the savings brought in by our administration seem to have worked better than estimated, and I thank officers for implementing them with such professionalism. But I still cannot vote in favour of this budget, as I'm of the opinion that we're only papering over the cracks, and we're opening ourselves up for a very large bill in the future, something I fear could put our devolution hopes in jeopardy and saddle folks with even larger council tax bills down the line. So as I stated earlier, I will be voting against the budget proposal. But as a footnote, Madam Mayor, I really am looking forward to hearing from our Reform representative explain how their Rockington election literature promises as to how they will freeze council tax and force the government into writing off Thurrock's debts. Although I do fear it's just a false promise.
Thank you. Are there any other members who wish to speak? Oh, Councillor Spate.
I've always wanted to say this. I refer to my previous answer. Listening to Councillor Kent, I think he sort of went slightly off beam as well in terms of talking about the greater picture of Essex and the amount of work that we've got to do with colleagues and things like that. And what worries me looking forward is that we've got some ideas in this budget which I've said are laudable. They're well thought out. We've got others that colleagues on this side of the House have said that are not well thought out. You know, we have a Labour authority just down the road in Basildon, which is buying everything that, well, it stands still, and they're spending hundreds of millions of pounds on buying property, which I just cannot fathom why that's going on. So what worries me, we've got a Labour authority here that are trying to be prudent, and then we've got a Labour authority down the road that are spending fortunes, and literally is fortunes. For example, I've had it in good authority that the leader of Basildon Council wanders round with his properties officer and says, we'll buy that, get it sorted, which is what they did with Wickford Police Station. So I'm really concerned about the future of what we're going to get into. I'm really concerned about the past because I'll repeat what I said. Myself and Councillor Kent have had many, many discussions over many, many years about the failings of this authority to have proper audited, signed off accounts. And as far as I'm aware, we still have lots of unsigned off matters to look at. So I'm always cautious about looking at figures that are put forward and statements that are made about what we're going to do and what we're not going to do. And earlier on, from across the floor there, I was told that there was something, was it £35,000 spent on Japanese knotweed on Daybreak. Well, actually, the work that took part on Daybreak site was to do with riparian issues and clearing the waterway. Japanese knotweed was a part of that, but the whole project was a bigger thing. So again, one wonders who's playing fast and loose with the truth here. As I said before, there are lots of good things in this budget if they can be achieved. There are lots of areas that concern me, and on this one, I have voted against a couple of things. On this one, I'm going to sit on my hands and just hope that they've got it right.
Thank you. Councillor Muldowney.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I felt a bit like I was going into an alternate reality when I heard the Leader of the Opposition speak. It's almost as if he's forgotten that it was his party's administration that bankrupted the council and left us in this situation in the first place. Over the last couple of weeks, I've seen some clips surface on social media of various members of the Cabinet back in February 2020 holding up their budget as a paragon of truthfulness and trustworthiness. Well, we know from the BVI report that at that point they knew that the first investment had gone bad, basically, had failed. That was Chip Limited. And that was £14 million. At the time, that was around 10% of the council's operating budget, but it didn't even raise an eyebrow. There doesn't seem to be any history of questioning around that. It certainly was not in any of the budget papers that was delivered that year, not reported in any of the budget papers. And most members didn't even know that we had an investment with Chip Limited at that point, let alone that it had gone wrong. So, I really do refute the opposition's claims that somehow this is a bad budget. Just reflecting on those past events. I do agree, however, with Councillor Johnson about the claims by Reform that they would somehow hold the government to ransom and not have any council tax rises until they wiped off the debt. I mean, I think this shows a fundamental misunderstanding that the council is in intervention. Commissioners are here. We've been lucky with our commissioners. They work with us in order to allow us to make decisions so that democracy can carry on, local democracy can carry on, and the members can have a say in that. If Reform were to take power and to try and hold the government to ransom, then the commissioners would just step in and we would lose any say in local democracy. So it's just a ridiculous statement to make. Either it's a result of people really misunderstanding how local finances work, or it's a deliberate attempt to mislead residents. So I just wanted to put that point straight. The other point that I want to make is about the 1% penalty interest that was being levied by the previous Conservative government against councils, including ours, that were receiving exceptional financial support. There's been a lot of nonsense spoken about that. So just to set the record straight, the Labour government indicated quite early on that they weren't going to continue with this punitive measure. It made no sense, as essentially it was a measure that was costing the government, who were having to lend us money to pay it. So it doesn't mean that we've got £10 million all of a sudden to spend on services. The actual amount that we'll be saving in interest charges is £3 million. It's very clearly stated in the report. So I just will direct our reform colleague to look at that, and please stop misleading residents that we've got an extra 10 million to spend on services. It's not the case. With that, I commend this budget.
Thank you. Leader, do you wish to respond? You have 10 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I kind of careful what you wish for. Come back, Councillor Jeffreys, all is forgiven. I've got to say to Councillor Cockshaw, it's people of our age that are supposed to be losing their memory, not people of his age. And I'll just remind him that on the 7th of January this year, he chaired General Services Committee of this council, a cross-party council, that was asked to look at whether or not we should apply to be part of the government's priority programme and whether we should request the postponement of elections. So, in fact, far from, as he put it, this administration begging for elections to be cancelled, this administration took the advice of one George Cockshaw, who came to Cabinet and recommended that we asked for those elections to be postponed. He says, Madam Mayor, that he finds nothing in the budget.
Madam Mayor, can I make a point of correction?
That will look.
Can we let the leader finish and then you can?
Madam Mayor, Councillor Cockshaw suggests that he finds nothing in the budget for delivering on devolution and local government reform. If he reads the papers closely, he will find that there is a sum of £2 million put to one side for that purpose. He talks about proposals from other authorities. Some, I think, may well have been written in crayon. The proposals that we come forward with, Madam Mayor, will be based on data and firm evidence, and will come forward with proposals that will lead to sustainable, self-sufficient local authorities in the future. And we will not rush that. That work is carrying on. He will see that work and will come to our conclusions when that work has completed. And as he knows, we are talking about a cabinet making the decision on the recommendation that we'll make into that process. That's what the law requires on the 19th of March. What we want to do is to hold the cabinet meeting in this chamber and to open it to all members, for all members to take part in that meeting, to have their say, to ask questions, to take part in the debate. Madam Mayor, I think that is our commitment to be as open as we possibly can. I have to say that I'm surprised that Councillor Cockshaw spent almost the bulk of his speech talking about one role that isn't in the budget. One of the things that scrutiny recommended, that Cabinet listened to and took away. Yet he still managed to talk about it what seemed like endlessly. And finally, I think I'm grateful to Councillor Cockshaw for raising Thurrock Cares. Thurrock Cares, a Labour initiative that has provided £750,000 of emergency financial support to local residents through the Essential Living Fund. 4,270 households have received financial support, help with heating bills and other essentials. and we've distributed a total of £62,170 to 540 pensioners through Thurrock Council's Pensioners Winter Support Fund. That is clearly demonstrating our commitment to helping those in need through tough times, Madam Mayor. A lot of talk about the Thames side. I just have to be, quite clear. The Conservatives first agreed they would close the Thames side in the back end of 2017. That's when it was first discussed at Cabinet. They then, in July 2021, reaffirmed their decision to close the Thames side. That was long before the financial disaster became clear. And Councillor Johnson said a couple of things. One of the things he said is, what is the difference in the surveys that have been produced? I'll tell you what the difference is. It depends on the question you ask. If you ask the question, give me a survey that makes the case for closing this building, that's what you get, and that's what you did, so that's what you got. I'm also just bemused that Councillor Johnson says a Conservative budget wouldn't be much different to this, but I'm still going to vote against it. I just find that incredible. Councillor Spate, we're not responsible for what goes on in Basildon. We're not responsible for Basildon Council. One of the things I will say is that anybody who was kind of bored a couple of Thursdays ago and tuned in to watch Basildon Council's budget setting council meeting, this has been so much more measured, so much more calm, so much more professional, and I thank members across the chamber for that. And finally, to Councillor Spate, of course he's right. We do have audited accounts that are outstanding, as do councils up and down the country. There is a crisis in audit, but no, we can never be sure, absolutely sure of our figures until the audit backstop kicks in and a line's drawn. Madam Mayor, I think I've covered everything that's been asked or raised, so I will ask that we move to the vote.
Thank you. Councillor Cockshall, you want to raise a correction?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to correct the record, yes, I did vote. I did chair General Services that evening, and I presented to Cabinet the recommendations of General Services. If I'm correct, in the minutes of the 7th of January, I voted against. I voted to abstain and did not support the proposal to go ahead and cancel the elections. I think that is a very key distinction just to make. And at the point of, I'm happy to say that my group did go through.
No, I think you've answered the correction. You've given it. Thank you. Okay, now the next bit is you'll need to listen, I'm afraid. So, in accordance with Council Procedure Rule 20.6, we are required to hold a recorded vote on any decision relating to the budget or council tax. It's therefore proposed that we undertake a recorded vote on recommendations A and B, recommendations C, D, I, J and K, and L, to be taken en bloc as an ordinary vote, with recommendations E, F, G, H being to note, but we will also take a vote on that. For the recorded vote, Democratic Services will read out the name of each member. I would ask that you use your microphone and clearly indicate whether you are voting in favour, against, or abstaining. Okay. We'll start with recommendations A and B. Recommendation A, to approve the recommended 2025 to 26 budget to Council for approval. Being mindful of comments from the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee to enable the Council tax for 2025 to 26 to be set. That's Appendix 2. Recommendation B, to be recommended to the Model Council Tax Resolution 2025 to 26 to Council for approval as set out in Appendix 9. Can I ask Democratic Services to undertake a recorded vote, please?
Thank you. Councillor Alike. Councillor Anderson.
Against.
Councillor Deborah Arnold.
Against.
Councillor Paul Arnold.
Against.
Councillor Byrne. Oh, sorry, yeah, Councillor Gary Byrne, apologies.
For.
Councillor Rossburn.
For.
Councillor Cecil.
For.
Councillor Chukwa.
For.
Councillor Cockshaw.
Against.
Councillor Day.
Against.
Councillor Fish.
For.
Councillor Fletcher.
For.
Councillor Fox.
For.
Councillor Gledhill.
Against.
Councillor Green.
For.
Councillor Howden. Councillor Hartstein.
For.
Councillor Heath.
For.
Councillor Cliff Holloway.
For.
Councillor Victoria Holloway. Councillor Hooper.
For.
Councillor Hurrell.
For.
Councillor Johnson.
Against.
Councillor Cathy Kent.
For.
Councillor John Kent.
For.
Councillor Kerrin.
For.
Councillor Lydiard.
For.
Councillor Ben Maney.
Against.
Councillor Jackie Maney.
Against.
Councillor Manwar.
For.
Councillor Massey.
Abstain.
Councillor Morris Cook.
For.
Councillor Muldowney.
For.
Councillor Panjala.
For.
Councillor Raper.
For.
Councillor Rigby.
Against.
Councillor Salmons.
For.
Councillor Shinnock.
For.
Councillor Sisterson.
For.
Councillor Spate.
Abstain.
Councillor Watson. Gary Watson, apologies. Councillor Lee Watson.
For.
And Councillor Worrell.
For. The results are there are 30 votes for, 11 votes against and 2 abstentions. Those 2 recommendations are carried. Recommendation C to recommend... I'm going to read these for you, but these are the ones we're clumping together, but we're still having a normal vote. So, recommendation C to recommend to Council that in accordance with section 38(2) of the Local Government Finance Act 1992, the Chief Executive be instructed to place a notice in the local press of the amounts set under recommendation 2 above with a period of 21 days following the Council's decision. Recommendation D to approve the medium-term financial strategy 2025 to 26 to 2028-29 for referral to the Council, Appendix 2. Recommendation I to approve to continue with the 100% deployment of the Household Support Fund through the Essential Living Fund, paragraph 5.1. Recommendation J to agree that Thurrock's 2025 to 26 early years funding formula be implemented as stated in paragraphs 8.7 and 8.13. This is consistent with previous decisions to maximise the funding rates that providers receive. Recommendation K to approve the repurposing of the recurrent revenue contingency budget as detailed in paragraphs 12.5. Recommendation L to recommend the 2025 to 26 members allowance scheme to Council for approval, Appendix 10. Right, we're now going to have move to the vote. It's not a recorded vote, so I will just ask you to show. So, do members approve recommendation C, D, L, J, K, I, J, K and L? For, please show. Those against, please show. Any abstentions? Thank you. That recommendation, those recommendations are approved. Members are asked to note the following recommendations. Recommendation E, to note the intention of to increase council tax by 2.99% in 2025 to 26, table 7. Recommendation F, to note the intention to increase council tax by a further 2% in 2025 to 26 in respect of the adult social care precept, table 7. Recommendation G, to note that the 2025 to 26 budget for public health as set out in Appendix 5. Recommendation H, to note the Council's revised capitalisation direction requirement of £691 million, which is set at a point in time and will continue to be subject to change. Paragraph 7.4, Table 5 and Table 5. Do members agree to note that? Thank you. How are we doing for time? Great, yeah, carry on. Item 14, questions from members. Members' questions can be found on page 213 of the agenda. I would ask those members who have submitted questions to please read out their question when asked to do so. I will take questions to the leader first. Question 1 from Councillor Johnson to the leader. Councillor Johnson, please read out your question as set out on page 213 of the agenda.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Would the Leader of the Council update us on conversations he has had with ministers around the Lower Thames crossing, please?
Leader, please respond to the question.
Madam Mayor, I've had no discussions with ministers on this subject since the 22nd of May last year.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson, do you wish to pose a supplementary question?
Yes, please, Madam Mayor. How are you going to ensure that the impact of the Labour government's decision to potentially go ahead with possibly a PFI scheme, which could cost a lot of money, but it will be reduced in all cities? Obviously, that's the word I'm asking for, but in general throughout this borough?
Leader, do you wish to respond, please?
Madam Mayor, we have long at this council on a cross-party basis opposed National Highways' proposed Lower Thames crossing, and we have lobbied government throughout this process. The council's position is and remains that the Lower Thames crossing should be cancelled. The size of the project means that it's not something that we decide on locally. It's a nationally important infrastructure project, and the development consent order was put through the planning process by the previous Conservative government. So it is therefore a decision for government that we await. The Secretary of State for Transport is expected to make an announcement on the scheme later in this year, probably in May. We will, of course, look carefully at the outcome of that decision, and if it's given the green light, we will continue to voice our opposition, and we will do all that we can to make the case to National Highways to secure the best possible future for Thurrock, no matter what the outcome of the project is. Madam Mayor, since this project was first mooted back in kind of 2008, 2009, we have maintained a strong cross-party unity on opposing a scheme that we believe will be damaging to our borough. And I am really disappointed that the Conservatives are now trying to make cheap political points out of this.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson, do you wish to pose a second supplementary question?
Yes, please, Madam Mayor. There's nothing cheap about this, Leader, at all. You just said you've had no discussions, so I don't know what kind of lobbying you're doing. Look, both yourself and the new Labour MP have been incredibly silent on this issue since the general election. Indeed, the Leader was exceptionally silent on Lower Thames Crossing when it was first proposed under Labour in 2009 and just subsequent meetings at CELEP. And now, since Labour have taken charge of central government, surely this is your three strikes. It now looks as though we will end up with a Lower Thames crossing, and if it goes in through a PFI scheme, it's going to cost a fortune. Do you not think that stronger local leadership from you, rather than just saying no, could have helped steer the government towards a different decision?
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, not for the first time, Councillor Johnson is talking absolute abject nonsense. He will recall that when I was leader of the council previously, we held 5 public meetings across Thurrock to raise awareness of the threat of the Lower Thames crossing. He will be aware that I met with ministers, including the Secretary of State, on 3 occasions to lobby on this. He will be aware that I appeared before the Parliamentary Select Committee on Transport to lobby on this. He will also, or should be aware, that since the Development Consent Order has finished its inspection process, it is impossible to lobby ministers on it. In fact, it would be illegal to do so. Madam Mayor, we have made every effort we can to oppose this from start to finish. I think it's shameful that at this late stage, Councillor Johnson wants to break that cross-party unity for cheap political point scoring.
Thank you. Thank you. Question 2 from Councillor Kelly to the leader. As Councillor Kelly has sent his apologies this evening, his question will be deferred to the next meeting. Question 3 from Councillor Coxall to the leader. Councillor Coxall, please read out your question as set out on page 213 of the agenda.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Appreciate things have moved on. Can the leader update the chamber on the status of the formation of the local government reform working group?
Madam Mayor, this working group will be chaired by Councillor Worrell, and I understand there was a meeting this afternoon that somebody earlier this evening described as a really good, constructive meeting. I think that was Councillor Coxall, so I think he knows the answer to the question.
You would appreciate, I wanted to keep the question for my supplementary, given that obviously I did not, when I put the question in, I wasn't aware that such meeting was going to take place. Obviously, based on your comments earlier in the budget, having a cabinet meeting for to discuss, all members to discuss local government reform before the executive goes and votes on it. Obviously, Councillor Kent, you do chair cabinet. How can members across the chamber feel that they can understand they'll go to the meeting, knowing that an impartial chair with the mayor not in position, be able to actually have that engagement of, is there going to be a limit on questions you can ask? Is it a debate? Is it a set time limit? I think the technicalities to ensure that it is fair and open for all councillors to engage with.
Thank you. Leader, do you wish to respond to that?
Yeah, and I think it's a more than reasonable question. Our starting point is that we want to be as open and inclusive and consensual on this matter as we possibly could be. I will chair the cabinet meeting, but I will give a firm commitment that members will be able to ask any questions and as many questions as they want, and members will be able to play a full part in the debate. I don't particularly want to set a time limit on it. I think this is so important that it takes as long as it takes. The only thing I would say is that when we get to the last 15 minutes, then it will be purely for portfolio holders to debate what they've heard and make a decision, but a decision that will be informed by the debate they've heard from the 49 members. And I would just urge, this is something that we haven't done before. This will be something of an innovation. And I would just ask that all members take it seriously, come along and get involved.
Thank you. Councillor Coxall, do you wish to pose a second supplementary question?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Obviously, a lot of people feel sometimes that is a role of full council, and I appreciate where the leader is coming from to saying that it is an executive decision. I'm just mindful so that members who do attend the cabinet meeting, would there be provision for an indicative vote, perhaps, of any proposals that come forward, so the cabinet can actually physically see of the members who actually do attend that meeting? Just a question for, since it is an innovation for an open cabinet.
Leader, do you respond, please?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, we'll consider all those things as we move up to the 19th of March, but I would have thought that the nature and the tone and the tenor of questions and comments and statements would be quite enough to let Cabinet know where members are coming from and what their will is.
Thank you. I'll now move on to questions to Cabinet members. Question 1 from Councillor Byrne to Councillor Hooper has been deferred. Question 2 from Councillor Rigby to the Councillor V. Holloway. Councillor Rigby, please read out your question as set out on page 213 of the agenda.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Please could the portfolio holder for Place and Environment explain the new policy for deceased cats and dogs found on council land and public highways?
Councillor Holloway, please respond to the question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
there is no formal policy in place, but the Clean and Green team is responsible for cleaning any deceased animals found on our public highways and council land. Recently, the team has formed a partnership with Pippa's Army, which has donated 2 scanners to help determine if any deceased animals that are found on the public highway are pets. If the animal is microchipped, the service will work with Pippa's Army to check the database and contact the owner. If the owner cannot be located, arrangements will be made for the animal to be collected and taken to one of the vets, where it will be kept for 7 to 10 days. During this time, Pippa's Army will advertise on their website in the hope of finding the owner.
Thank you. Councillor Rigby, do you wish to pose a supplementary question?
Yes, please. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you. How will it be reassuring to residents that this sort of new partnership, as you refer to it, will be consistent, and that if there's changes in teams and management and working teams, that it will carry on? Because the previous arrangements sort of were disbanded. Not quite sure why, maybe due to, I think, a change of working teams. So how can we get reassurance with some consistency, please?
Councillor Victoria Holloway, would you like to respond?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. The team will be consistent in this newly applied policy and this newly applied partnership. I think anyone that owns a pet knows how emotive it is when they go missing. So, you know, I've definitely pressed on the team that it will be very emotional for people. And if people are able to find out what has happened to their pets, then it's really important. So there will be a consistency applied, Councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Rigby, do you wish to pose a second supplementary question?
Yes, please. Thank you, Madam Mayor. On the council website at the moment, there is a statement regarding to deceased animals found on public highways and council land. Can that be amended, or can you look into seeing if it can be amended in any way to make some reference to pet animals? Because it is quite a shocking statement on the website if you were to look on there.
Councillor Victoria Holloway.
Yes, thank you. You make a very good point. I have seen it on the website. It's very short, it's very curt, and I absolutely agree with your suggestion. I'll speak to the team about updating that, yes.
Thank you. Question 3 from Councillor Rigby to Councillor Hooper. Councillor Rigby, please read out your question as set out on page 213 of the agenda.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Following the recent Care Quality Commission requires improvement rating for Basildon Maternity Unit. One of the issues raised was that staff didn't feel they could raise concern to leaders because leaders didn't always reply to them. Do you know what matters are being instigated to try and improve this, please?
Councillor Hooper, please respond to the question.
Thank you for your question, Councillor. In January 25, the CQC published its report on maternity services at Basildon Hospital, Broomfield Hospital and Southend Hospital. Despite the report only coming out in January, the actual inspection actually took place in spring 24. So some of the dates I may give you think, well, why is Councillor talking about dates in September? Okay, so I assume that the hospital had a pre-report before the official report was actually sent out. So I think some of the actions are from the pre-report. Right. So the maternity services from Basildon Hospital remained required improvement overall. That's not good. The maternity services ratings for required improvement were around safety, effectiveness, and well-led. And there was a good rating around being responsive to patients. This is disappointing, to be perfectly honest, because the previous CQC inspection raised similar issues. However, the Section 31 warning from the previous inspection was lifted, so that's moving in the right direction. The CQC Section 31 basically means that the CQC, under the Health and Social Care Act of 2008, give notice to the registered person that the CQC have decided that they could actually suspend the registration or extend the supervision of the registration or even remove or impose conditions on the registration. Not a good place to be. However, it is lifted. So really in response to your question, The Trust have made several changes to amend the improvement of the services, including within the midwifery service. They've actually have the lowest vacancies now that they've had for 3 years. So between September and November, they actually recruited 25 newly qualified midwives. The service leaders are now carrying out comprehensive training to make sure and monitoring that training, because there clearly was a shortfall in the training of its staff. The Trust have put more midwifery support to address the daily appointments. So there was a poor response in terms of getting appointments for people attending birth reflection clinics. That's actually been addressed, so I've been informed. Right. As part of regular interaction between staff and senior management, the Trust are holding listening events led by the Director of Midwifery. The staff have several routes to escalate concerns, including an independent guardian service. The Trust have many systems where things can be logged or reports of incidents can be sent to senior managers, and this is actually being used quite a lot, which is some evidence that staff are feeling more comfortable about raising concerns. Also, the matrons and the head of midwifery at the trusts are all attending further leadership training courses. It's a step in the right direction.
Thank you. Councillor Rigby, do you wish to pose a supplementary question?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. Item 15, reports from members representing the Council on outside bodies. Does any member who represents the Council on an outside body wish to present a report? Thank you. Item 16, minutes of committees. These are listed in the agenda on the contents page. Item 17, motions update report. These are listed in the agenda on pages 215 to 218 in the agenda. Councillor Spate has requested to speak on this item, which I have agreed to. Councillor Spate, would you like to make your comments, please? You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. To say I was disappointed with the content, and I'm referring to the motion that we put forward regarding an investigation into planning services. To say I was disappointed with the content of that report would be an understatement. I would thank a couple of members of Cabinet who did raise concerns when it was presented about some of the numbers that were there. I was expecting, and indeed the motion mandated, a deep dive, subjective assessment of some of the more controversial decisions taken, particularly during those 2 peak years when there were sharp rises in officer rejections being overturned. Instead, Dr. Smith's version of a subjective deep dive was to cut and paste the applicant's proposal. I felt there were legitimate, evidenced reasons to call in the report, a view shared by all but one of the voting members at Place ONS last week. Instead, my call-in was rejected on the grounds that the report was by a commissioner, not a CEO, even though the motion referred to a CEO. There is a methodology through which this can and will remain in the public eye, but I view it as a very sad day for our hopes of honesty, transparency and accountability when the senior officer of the council turns his back on an opportunity to investigate what I am certain is past the threshold of being bad governance and strays into the territory of criminality. I'm sick to death of seeing senior representatives of this council kick can after can of legitimate concern about bad or criminal practice into the long grass. We can and always should learn lessons from the past. In this instance, we appear to have shut the door on a bad smell, but I can assure the CEO or Commissioner that when something looks like a duck, sounds like a duck, and walks like a duck, it is usually a duck. And in this instance, he has shamefully ducked the issue.
Thank you. I'd just like to take this opportunity to remind members that the performance of the planning service is due to go to March Place ONS Committee, where it can be discussed and recommendations made. Item 18, Two motions have been submitted for tonight's meeting. Motion 2 has been withdrawn in advance, so we will only be considering the first motion. Motion 1. Councillor Spate, please read out the and speak on your motion as printed on page 219 of the agenda.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Following the decision, following the decision by a second successive government to reject this council's request for a public inquiry into its financial collapse, this chamber takes heed of the local government minister's words when he said that he supports any local action to explore the reasons leading to historic issues to ensure that we can all learn. The BVI document is an explanatory document, but it openly stops short of investigating serious issues that it identifies. These remain unexplored and unexplained in the public eye. Therefore, we ask the Executive, i.e. the Cabinet, to consider all further options open to the Council to look into past actions and fulfil this authority's pledge to our residents to be open, honest and transparent. And if I can briefly speak to that motion, this is a relatively simple motion which I proposed because I believe it is important that this democratic chamber mandates Cabinet. Councillor Kent and I have already discussed at some length the outcomes of my two previous motions relating to the request for an independent inquiry into the failings of this authority in relation to its financial collapse. Unlike the Minister, I remain convinced that the BVI did little other than scrape the surface of a festering morass. There are many unanswered questions, and these questions are repeatedly asked of the members in this chamber by the public. It is embarrassing that we have no answers. There are a number of options now open to the Council, and I believe the best way forward will be an engagement with other troubled councils who may also have suffered mismanagement and irresponsible borrowing. Hopefully the matter can then be referred to a parliamentary committee which has the power to hold those involved to account in public. I hope this motion is supported and the Executive then moves prudently and quickly.
Thank you. Is motion 1 seconded? Do you wish to speak now, Councillor Byrne, or reserve your right to speak later?
I reserve my right to speak later.
Thank you. Does any other member wish to speak on the motion? Councillor Kent, if you start. Councillor John Kent.
Madam Mayor, we will be supporting this motion, of course. The decision of the Minister was disappointing, but of course not unexpected. My view remains the same as it has since September 2022, and that is that we do need an independent inquiry to get under the skin and discover just what it was that led to the financial collapse of this council. And I also agree, and I said it for the first time, I think, in July of 23, that any inquiry should go across those authorities. At that time, it was 8 authorities that had served Section 114 notices, places like Woking and Croydon and Northamptonshire, to have a look at the commonalities, to have a look at what led to that almost contagion in the sector. Look at things such as the impact of austerity on local authorities, the impact of the scrapping of external scrutiny bodies such as the Audit Commission, the government of the time's drive to the commercialisation agenda, as they called it, for councils. The role of external auditors. How can it be that external auditors were signing off accounts year after year after year when things like this were going on? The role of the government department. How can it be that this authority borrowed close on £1 billion from 200 other local councils, and nobody in authority, nobody at a government level seemed to notice it, be aware of it, or do anything about it? So, you know, I do believe that we still need an inquiry. Councillor Spate talks of a local inquiry. The problem with a local inquiry is that it wouldn't be a statutory inquiry. And whatever we do has to be, in my view, a statutory inquiry so we can compel people to come and give evidence. Anything else just simply won't wash. I've said for a long time that I think one of the solutions may be to ask the Parliamentary Select Committee for Local Government to have a look at those 8 councils, both individually, to have a look at the individual circumstances, to get under the skin of what happened in each of those authorities, but also to have a look at the collective impact, to look collectively at what happened across the sector at that time. I think it's essential that lessons are learned, not only for Thurrock, but for the entire local government family. So yes, we will be supporting the motion, and yes, we will be doing everything we can to carry on pressing for a meaningful independent inquiry.
Thank you. Councillor Byrne, do you now wish to speak on the substantive motion as seconder?
Yes, I've just deleted most of my speech because it's already been said, but Thurrock was left dead in the gutter while high-ranking officials walked away from it, leaving the residents to suffer the consequences of their actions and pay the price for other people's actions for decades to come. Only a full inquiry will satisfy the good people of Thurrock. No one will ever believe it was one man and his dog was responsible for Thurrock's fall from grace. I say let's fix this big cloud that's hanging over us while the sun is shining, and continue to demand a full inquiry. That's the only way we're going to satisfy our residents, the only way you're going to satisfy me. As long as there may be people walking around in plain sight that are guilty, we cannot bury this, we cannot let it go.
Thank you. Are there any other members wish to speak? Councillor Spate, do you wish to have your right of reply? You have 2 minutes.
Very briefly, thank you, Councillor Byrne, for your comments. I think Councillor Kent actually hit the nail on the head. It's the ability to hold people to account, and he's quite right. We could set up an investigation within this authority. We could spend money on lawyers or whatever, but we would have no ability to compel people to attend before that committee, which Parliament would. So I think, and it was Councillor Kent who he and I have had a number of discussions on this. He suggested that. I thought it was a really, really good idea, and I thank him for that. So I'm more than happy now to leave it in the hands of the executive, and hopefully, just hopefully, the relationship possibly with other councils, which are cross-party, which is good, will mean that we actually get the opportunity to put some people in the hot seat, ask them some difficult questions, and then the residents of Thurrock will stop questioning us because they'll see the answers.
Thank you. I'll now move to the vote. All those members in favour of the motion, please show. Thank you. All those against? Any abstentions? Thank you. That concludes the business of the meeting this evening, and I now declare the meeting closed at 21:22. Thank you.